All right. Good afternoon, guys. So I decided to read to you guys today from Thomas Merton. His There's a book called Seeds of Contemplation, and I really liked a specific section called "The Moral Theology of the Devil," which is what I will be reading today. And the reason why I really like this section and something that I think a lot of people might have some contemplation on is that when I when I when I read to you guys this contemplation from Merton, you will start to realize that a lot of this sounds like the typical Christianity that people actually hate, or that the typical Christianity that people are very familiar with. Um, so just to respond, Will Green, Merton, interesting guy, interesting death. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I was watching a video recently about Merton's death and how actually it could have. Some guy wrote a book about it being possibly a CIA hit, which is interesting. But and we could probably all talk about that. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. So, anyways, I'll begin. So the section again is called "The Moral Theology of the Devil" by Thomas Merton. The devil has a whole system of theology and philosophy, which will explain to anyone who will listen that created things are evil, that men are evil, that God created evil, and that he directly wills that men should suffer evil. According to the devil, God rejoices in the suffering of men, and in fact, the whole universe is full of misery because God has willed and planned it that way. Indeed, says this system of theology, God the Father took real pleasure in delivering his Son to his murderers, and God the Son came to earth because he wanted to be punished by the Father. Both of them together seek nothing more than to punish and persecute their faithful ones. As a matter of fact, in creating the world, God had clearly in mind that man would inevitably sin, and it was almost as if the world were created in order that man might sin, so that God would have an opportunity to manifest his justice. So, according to the devil, the first thing created was really hell, as if everything else were, in some sense, for the sake of hell. Therefore, the devotional life of those who are faithful to this kind of theology consists above all in an obsession with evil, as if there were not already enough evils in the world. They multiply prohibitions and make new rules, binding everything with thorns, so that man may not escape evil and punishment. For they would have him bleed from morning to night, though even with so much blood there is no remission of sin. The cross, then, is no longer a sign of mercy, for mercy has no place in such a theology. It is the sign that law and justice have utterly triumphed, as if Christ had said, I came not to destroy the law, but to be destroyed by it. For this, according to the devil, is the only way in which the law could really and truly be fulfilled. Not love, but punishment is the fulfillment of the law. The law must devour everything, even God. Such is this theology of punishment, hatred, and revenge. He who would live by such a dogma must rejoice in punishment. He may, indeed, successfully evade punishment himself by playing ball with the law and the lawgiver, but he must take good care that others do not avoid suffering. He must occupy his mind with their present and future punishment. The law must triumph. There must be no mercy. This is the chief mark of the theology of hell. For in hell, there is everything but mercy. That is why God himself is absent from hell. Mercy is the manifestation of his presence. The theology of the devil is for those who, for one reason or another, whether because they are perfect or because they have come to an agreement with the law, no longer need any mercy. With them, O grim joy, God is satisfied. So too is the devil. It is quite an achievement to please everybody. The people who listen to this sort of thing and absorb it and enjoy it develop a notion of the spiritual life, which is a kind of hypnosis of evil. The concepts of sin, suffering, damnation, punishment, the justice of God, retribution, the end of the world, and so on are things over which they smack their lips with unspeakable pleasure. Perhaps this is because they derive a deep, subconscious comfort from the thought that many other people fall into the hell which they themselves are going to escape. And how do they know they are going to escape it? They cannot give any definitive reason except for the fact that they feel a certain sense of relief at the thought that all this punishment is prepared for practically everyone but themselves. This feeling of complacency is what they refer to as faith, and it constitutes a kind of conviction that they are saved. The devil makes many disciples by preaching against sin. He convinces them of the great evil of sin, induces a crisis of guilt by which God is satisfied, and after that, he lets them spend the rest of their lives meditating on the intense sinfulness and evident reprobation of other men. The moral theology of the devil starts out with the principle pleasure is sin. Then he goes on to work it in the other way. All sin is pleasure. After that, he points out that pleasure is practically unavoidable and that we have a natural tendency to do things that pleases us, for which he reasons that all our natural tendencies are evil and that our nature is evil in itself, and he leads us to the conclusion that no one can possibly avoid sin, since pleasure is inescapable. After that, to make sure that no one will try to escape or avoid sin, he adds that what is unavoidable cannot be a sin. Then the whole concept of sin is thrown out the window as irrelevant, and people decide that there is nothing left except to live for pleasure. And in that way, pleasures that are naturally good become evil by deordination, and lives are thrown away in unhappiness and sin. It sometimes happens that men who preach most vehemently about evil and the punishment of evil, so that they seem to have practically nothing else on their minds except sin, are really unconscious haters of other men. They think the world does not appreciate them, and this is their way of getting even. The devil is not afraid to preach the will of God, provided he can preach it in his own way. The argument goes something like this: God wills you to do what is right, but you have an interior attraction which tells you, by a nice warm glow of satisfaction, what is right. Therefore, if others try to interfere and make you do something that does not produce this comfortable sense of interior satisfaction, quote scripture, tell them that you ought to obey God rather than men, and then go ahead and do your own will. Do the thing that gives you that nice, warm glow. The theology of the devil is really not theology, but magic. Faith in this theology is really not the acceptance of a God who reveals himself as mercy. It is a psychological, subjective force which applies a kind of violence to reality in order to change it according to one's own whims. Faith is a kind of super effective wishing, a mastery that comes from a special, mysteriously dynamic willpower that is generated by profound convictions. By virtue of this wonderful energy, one can exert a persuasive force even on God himself and bend his will to one's own will. By this astounding new dynamic soul force of faith, which any quack can develop in you for an appropriate remuneration. I cannot say that word. You can turn God into a means to your own ends. We become civilized medicine men, and God becomes our servant. Though he is terrible in his own right, he respects our sorcery. He allows himself to be tamed by it. He will appreciate our dynamism and will reward it with success in everything we attempt. We'll become popular because we have faith. We will be rich because we have faith. All our national enemies will come and lay down their arms at our feet because we have faith. Business will boom all over the world, and we will be able to make money out of everything and everyone under the sun because of the charmed life we lead. We have faith. But there is a subtle dialectic in all this too. We hear that faith does everything, so we close our eyes and strain a bit to generate some soul force. We believe, nothing happens. We close our eyes again and generate some more soul force. The devil likes us to generate soul force. He helps us to generate plenty of it. We are just gushing with soul force, but nothing happens. So we go on with this until we become disgusted with the whole business. We get tired of generating soul force. We get tired of this faith that does not do anything to change reality. It does not take away our anxieties or conflicts. It leaves us a prey to uncertainty. It does not lift all responsibilities off our shoulders. Its magic is not so effective after all. It does not thoroughly convince us that God is satisfied with us, or even that we are satisfied with ourselves. Though in this, it is true, some people's faith is often quite effective. Having become disgusted with faith, and therefore with God, we are now ready for the totalitarian mass movement that will pick us up on the rebound and make us happy with war, with the persecution of inferior races or of any enemy classes, or generally speaking, with actively punishing someone who is different from ourselves. Another characteristic of the devil's moral theology is the exaggeration of all distinctions between this and that, good and evil, right and wrong. These distinctions become irreducible divisions. No longer is there any sense that we might perhaps all be more or less at fault, and that we might be expected to take upon our own shoulders the wrongs of others by forgiveness, acceptance, patient understanding, and love, and thus help one another to find the truth. On the contrary, in the devil's theology, the important thing is to be absolutely right and to prove that everybody else is absolutely wrong. This does not exactly make for peace and unity among men, because it means that everyone wants to be absolutely right himself, or to attach himself to another who is absolutely right. And in order to prove their rightness, they have to punish and eliminate those who are wrong. Those who are wrong, in turn, convinced that they are right, etc. Finally, as might be expected, the moral theology of the devil grants an altogether unusual amount of importance to the devil. Indeed, one soon comes to find out that he is the very center of the whole system, that he is behind everything, that he is moving everybody in the world except ourselves, that he is out to get even with us, and that there is every chance of his doing so because it now appears his power is equal to that of God, or even perhaps superior to it. In one word, the theology of the devil is purely and simply that the devil is God. All right. So that's the end of that contemplation. I picked this Seed of Contemplation from Merton because it really explains and explicates some of people's behavior in just in religions or Christianity, like the whole aspect of telling people that they're going to hell, and a lot of emphasis on punishment and um, hell and suffering. These types of emphasis, like we're all very familiar with, and I feel like this is exactly what Merton is kind of attacking. That somehow something's missing out of this whole element, and typically it's God's mercy, or we could say God's love, is a pivotal missing emphasis that is not talked about. Is what is constantly talked about actually is the hell, the suffering, the crime, the punishment, how everything is evil, how everything, you know, and I thought this was actually a really great contemplation because it really shows, in my opinion, how a majority of people's understanding of, I would say, most layman understanding of Christianity is exactly this. Even people that don't believe in Christianity, I would say they have this exact layman understanding. You know, a lot of people's gripes with Christianity has to do a lot with the punishments, the crime, the suffering, hell itself. Um, and yet nothing is ever brought up about God's love, right? It's the obsession and it's funny because actually a lot of the critique, the atheist critique, is exactly those. And then you get, and then the irony is that a lot of the people in practicing embrace it, right? Yes, yes, you will go to hell, I won't. you know, um, and I just really love this section because it really, I thought Merton did such a good job just attacking, and showing how a majority of whatever theology we follow, it seems like the layman theology is actually the theology of the devil, where there's a great obsession with the devil and crime and punishment and suffering. There's just great emphasis on that, and that's all they want you to pay attention to, and how everything is evil, um, and so on. So yeah, I just wanted to really share that because it it gave me a lot to think about, and I thought it was worth sharing, um, about this context. So yeah, keep going on here. Blessings. Thanks, Will. Thanks. Um, but yeah, much love, much love, much love, Will. Thanks. All right. Well, I mean that's really what I want to share. So, um, yeah, but I thought it was very important to share it because you know who knows who might need it. So, all right, you guys take care. All right, bye.